Hi, everyone. We've got about 24 people joining us right now. We'll give people just a few minutes to log in and we'll do a quick intro. How about that? I'll introduce myself real quickly. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bayless and I'm with the American Bonanza Society. So I work at our headquarters here in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm the Director of Member Services. And with me today, I have Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley in the red. Hi, Bob.
Good morning, afternoon, Lauren. I'm Bob Ripley, the Senior Technical Advisor. I'm in my office in my shop in the Atlanta area, and we'll be happy to have everybody on board today, and we'll try to answer your questions.
Yeah, we're real excited to give this a shot. This is something new for us. We've never done a Facebook Live before, so give us a little bit of grace today as we try this out for the first time. Bob and I are going to try to work this out and see if we can answer as many of your technical questions as possible. Because of the situation with all of the ABS staff working from home right now, we're unable to transfer technical calls to our technical advisors. So we're gonna do our best to try to get you connected with Bob here, and hopefully he can help you guys out. So as you guys are joining us and logging in, if you have questions for Bob, please go ahead and post those in the comment section, and I will kind of be hosting and feeding those to Bob so that he can answer those questions for you. So we've got hellos from a lot of people all over right now. And Bob, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started.
I'm ready, Lauren. Let's try to see what happens here.
Okay. So from Dwayne Emmons, we have, how long should you fly your bow in order to drive out all the moisture in the engine and oil?
On a good rule of thumb, if you can fly the airplane 30 minutes to an hour once a week, that pretty well takes care of all the moisture. You can never get it all out because an internal combustion engine is making moisture or making water all the time that it's running. But getting it up to normal operating temperatures of oil temperatures of 165 to 185 does a pretty good job. And it takes about 30 minutes to an hour to get the water off.
Awesome. And we're getting hellos from a lot of people all over. So I just want to let you know, Bob, people are saying hello and saying hi to you. And Bob also does our service clinic. He's one of our service clinic inspectors. And so one question we have is, what is the most common discrepancy that you see at a service clinic?
That's a hard one. I guess the most common I see at service clinics is rigging issues with the airplane. Ailerons dramatically out of rig, elevators out of rig. That's one of the biggest things I see on walk-around inspections. And then the second in line, I probably find the most discrepancies in the landing gear area. And third would be engine area. Little things on the engine not put together right. People that are working on the airplane don't understand the Bonanza or know the idiosyncrasies of the engine installation. It's just specific to the airplane. You have to be a beach mechanic to understand what's going on up there and understand the landing gear.
Yeah, that's good. We've got a question here from Russell, and he says, any tips on lubricating the main landing gear scissors? I've tried jacking the aircraft, but the zerts still won't take grease. Finally disabled the scissor links and cleaned out old grease. However, still very difficult to get grease through, even with the pneumatic gun.
What you can do, it helps sometimes if you got grease fittings that are blocked up or are just real stiff, hard to lube. Take a heat gun, buy yourself a heat gun or take a hair dryer and heat the grease fitting up a little bit and then try to put some grease in it hot. Sometimes it'll push the old grease out and let the new grease flow. If it doesn't, you've got to take the fitting out and replace it.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and I just want to jump back here and let everyone know who's just now joining us. We have several more people that just jumped on. We've got Bob here, Senior Technical Advisor for ABS, and then Lauren here from Wichita hosting for you guys. So we're going to continue on with some additional questions. So feel free as you think of questions or if you have anything you've been dying to ask Bob, now is the time. So post your question in the comment section and we'll get to them as soon as possible. We have another question here from an ABS member named Sam. He says, hi, Bob. Last annual, our mechanic replaced our landing gear motor, 24 volt A36. Now the inboard door hangs open 1 inch on each side. He is convinced it is an in-flight electrical problem, as when it is swung on the ground power supply, it closes all the way.
Hi, Sam. It sounds like more like your problem is with a new motor installed, the dynamic brake function of the landing gear system on a 24-volt airplane goes through the relay. And new motors that are put in, as they get used and the brushes seat better to the inside of the motor, they become more and more and more efficient at braking the gear to a stop. What I'd like you to do the next time you fly, you didn't say whether this was in the up position or the down position, but I assume it's the down position. After you fly the airplane, come back to the ramp and unstow the manual hand crank and turn it counterclockwise. It should rotate somewhere around a half a turn. If it rotates more than that, your mechanic needs to readjust the gear down travel to get it down to, I don't know the serial number of the airplane, but get it down to the specs that it's called for. Some airplanes are 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. Some airplanes are 5/8 to 3/4. If it's at a half, it'll fit most of them without being any problem.
Awesome. And then we've got a question here from Jonathan Fink. He says, the heating in my 1960 Deb does almost nothing in the back seat. It gets cold back there. Do you have any suggestions?
There is a duct under the back seat, Jonathan, that goes through the front spar that provides heating into the back seat area. Make sure that duct is still there. Make sure it's not degraded. We see them all the time in our shop that are all falling apart. It may be as simple as replacing the duct. The second thing, on that airplane, your heater muffler is on the left side of the engine unless you've had a modified engine put in it. Look up the tailpipe and make sure the flame cones are still inside the muffler. If the flame cones are not in the muffler, it allows the air to go through so fast you get very, very little heat out of it.
Okay, very good. We got a question here from Paul, and he says, Paul Sherrod, he says, how tight do I make the gas cap when I reinstall O-rings? Is it different for silicone O-rings?
No, it's the same for both O-rings. It should require you to have a little bit of pressure to push it over center. And if you can put one finger up and lift it up with a little bit of tension on it, take a little bit of force, you're set just about right.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Got another question here from a member named John Sandvig. He says, regarding elevator rod end fittings, what criterion should I use to decide when they need replacement?
What kind of airplane, Lauren, did he say?
He didn't say. So John, if you see or if you hear us, let us know what type of aircraft you have. And this goes for everyone. I'll pop back on here. For anyone posting your question, if you want to give us your aircraft model and serial number, if you have that, that will be very helpful for Bob as he tries to answer these questions for you. So again, welcome to this live stream with Bob Ripley, and feel free to post your technical questions in the comment section and let us know what aircraft you have and the serial number if you happen to have that handy as well.
Okay, back to John.
Yes, so John says he has an F-33A.
Okay, you have a straight tail airplane. If you can take the trailing edge of the elevator, not the trim tab, but the elevator, and move it up and down more than 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and it's just free play, not moving the flight controls, the rod end bearings need to be replaced. On a V-tail airplane, I'll add this in, yours is not a V-tail, but on a V-tail, any movement at all on a V-tail, any movement, if it just moves a 32nd of an inch, it's time to change the rod end bearings because of flutter issues.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. And now we got a question here from Scott. He says, hello, Lauren and Bob. Bob, my work schedule is 7 days away from home and 7 days off duty. I have no shared aircraft partner. What is the best thing I can do for engine longevity if I'm only able to fly once every 2 to 3 weeks?
You could put a dehumidifier on the airplane to keep the corrosion down. I would suggest probably running some cam guard in it. I don't know what type oil you're using, but if you put the cam guard in it, that does help prevent the corrosion. If you can fly it every 2 to 3 weeks, that will help a lot. At least try to do it that much. But a dehumidifier into the vent system would help a little bit. Or like I said, the best thing is to try to fly it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we got a question from Mark. He says, should the landing gear limit switches be replaced at certain intervals, resistance testing, or run to fail?
Well, we don't have much problem with the switches. I've been working on Bonanzas now for 30 plus years, and I've only changed 3 switches on airplanes over my whole career, and we do about 100 airplanes a year in our shop. And it's just not a failure item. 90% of the landing gear problems we have with electrical are either the motor or the handle itself, the main landing gear control handle for up and down position.
Excellent. Thanks so much for doing this, Bob. I really appreciate it. I know this is a lot of rapid fire questions to you, so if you need a break or anything, you just let me know. Otherwise, we'll keep going. We've got over 100 people on right now, and they're just
that's great.
Bringing questions in, so this is great. So we'll go on to Joe Rizzo. He has a question here, and he says, what do I need to do to keep my 1,200-hour IO 520 running for another 500 to 1,000 hours?
Well, Joe, the best thing you can do is fly it. The best thing you can do to an airplane, if you could fly it every day. I have a customer in my shop that flies his airplane. They fly approximately 400 hours a year. And it will go TBO to TBO, and we never change the cylinder. So that just proves that use is a good thing for it. You're not going to wear it out flying it, and don't baby it. Fly the airplane, make it operate, take it easy. Don't take it easy with it. Fly it the way it's supposed to be flown. That's the only thing you're really going to do to keep it going. But try to fly it as much as you can.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. And John Goldberg has a 1998 A36, and he says, how often do the wing bolts really need to be replaced? And also, is there a frequency for retorquing?
Okay. Textron or Beechcraft or Raytheon, what it's been over the years, they asked to have the wing bolts removed every 5 years and replaced at a 15-year interval. We have been sending bolts to Textron over the years out of airplanes, and so has members been sending to us, and we've been sending them to Textron. We feel that a replacement at 20-year interval, especially on the older airplanes, because they were installed under a dry method. The newer airplanes are installed under a wet method and are less prone to corrosion issues in areas that you can't see. Once the wing bolts have been replaced, they require a retorque in 100 flight hours, and then they should be good the rest of the life of the airplane, especially if they've been installed under the new wet method. 20-year intervals is what we suggest.
Okay, great. So kind of along the same lines, we've got a question here from Christopher. He says, how tight should the aileron screws be tightened? Is there a torque spec for that? I want to have those replaced and want to make sure they are replaced. Thanks.
There is no spec that I've ever seen. It's a standard number 10 machine screw. It's a special screw because it is a stress screw. You cannot put any certain screw in there. And if you need the part number, send us the tech tips on the forum page, and I'll be glad to give you the part number for what you need. But a normal tightening up with a good screwdriver or a battery-powered drill works just fine.
Awesome. We got a question here from Sid Lambert, and he says, TCM says not to run under 2,300 RPM, but Bush POH says to ignore it. What are your suggestions?
That is only for the 520 and the 550 engine. 2,300 RPM and above is normal operation due to a harmonic issue inside the engine. I think the factory is I've never seen the documentation where there's been actual failures, but there has been some. I talked with a gentleman this morning on there's another possible AD coming out on the cross-flow engines that don't affect many of our airplanes that had a failure because they were running it under 2,300 RPM. And it caused the engine to have an issue. I would suggest staying above 2,300 as a Continental recommendation because they're the factory that builds the engine.
Perfect. Okay, and we've been on the air for about 15 minutes, so I'm going to jump back in and welcome those who are new, who are just logging in and getting a chance to ask their questions. Right now, we're doing Tech Tip Hour with ABS Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley. He is at his shop in Griffin, Georgia, and I'm Lauren Bayless, Director of Member Services at the American Bonanza Society, sheltering in place at my house right now. So as you guys continue to join us, please feel free to use the comment section and post your questions, and we'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Again, if you know your aircraft model and serial number, please try to post that along with your question as well, as that will help us make sure we get you the correct answer. So thank you to those who are just now joining us. We're glad to have you. This is our first ever Facebook Live with the American Bonanza Society. So hopefully that gave you a quick break, Bob. I'm going to jump back into questions now.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a question here from Matt Briner. He says, hi, Bob. Do you know what fuel flow rate should be on takeoff at sea level on an IO 520? I'm only getting around 2,400 GPH. The POH says top of green arc operating range is 24.3 GPH, but I read on Beach Talk that it should be closer to 27.5 GPH on an IO 520 on takeoff at sea level. What do you suggest the fuel flow on takeoff be set to keep CHTs from getting too hot on takeoff?
Fuel system setup is something that has to be done by a qualified shop with external gauges, not the gauges in the airplane. On an average IO 520, like we see in the Bonanza aircraft, 24.9 is the upper limit for fuel flow on takeoff. Or if you still have the older analog type gauge, you'll see a little red radial line at about the 530 position on the gauge that says 17.5. That is fuel pressure. That's what the old analog gauges read. But if you have a digital counter fuel flow, 24.9 is the maximum setting that the book calls for on the Continental IO 520. A little bit higher is not going to hurt, but getting up around 27 or 28 gallons an hour, when you pull the engine back in the pattern or pull it back at lower power settings, it causes the return fuel to start backing up into the engine and cause the engine to rumble or run a little bit rough. I wouldn't suggest anything above 25.2, something along in there.
Perfect. Okay, and then we've got a question here from Lorraine who says, thoughts on a periodic replacement of exhaust valve rotors to reduce cylinder problems? This is from Cliff Hoffman, actually. He has an F-33A IO 550.
I'm not a proponent of this because it requires getting into the valve train system, changing the way the valves are in the engine and changing the rotors. It's not hard to do, but it's pretty labor extensive, especially if you have the Shannon cooling systems. I see too many engines go TBO to TBO that are flown regularly without doing anything to them. The biggest issue with the Continental engine is the valve train and the valve issues with the exhaust valves, not seating correctly. And I don't think it's so much a rotating issue. I think it's more of the guide issue.
Perfect. And then Chris Nowak first says, Bob, thank you for doing this for the membership. Have you had any feedback on the electronic ignition systems? I have an IO 470C. Any thoughts?
I have the Electro Air installed on my airplane, the electronic system, which is the most expensive system. I don't have any new data on the SureFly system or SureFire system. I'm not sure what it's called, which is a direct mag replacement. The Electro Air system, I'm very, very happy with it. It makes hot starts much, much easier. I do get a little bit more power on takeoff and at cruise because the spark is being changed. And my fuel burn is about 2 gallons an hour less, 1 to 2 gallons an hour less in cruise. And it's very, very smooth on that electronic system because when it fires, by the time the real magneto fires, the electronic system, the whole event is already over with because the spark is being retarded below 25 inches of manifold pressure. It's a good system. It's an expensive system to do. It's probably $6,500 to $7,000 to install it. And the new direct mag replacement, I'm not sure it's going to do exactly the same thing. I have not done much research into it.
Okay, good information. And we got a question here from Joseph Fiddleman. He said, what is the likely cause for a blue super sticky goop dripping from the jack point under the wing? Fuel bladders? It is a consistency similar to tar or chewing gum. This is a 1979 V35B.
Hi, Joe. I know Joe real well. It is a fuel leak, Joe. It could be a bladder. It could be one of the fuel transmitters leaking around the gasket slightly, which is very, very common because the screws leak with the cork gaskets. The plate around the fuel filler neck could be removed and check the screws, and the plate just outboard of the fuselage on top of the wing could be removed and check the screws to make sure they're all tight. That's the first thing I would do. If that doesn't fix the problem, you've probably got a bladder with a broken vent tube or a bladder that's cracking and needs to be replaced.
Awesome, thanks. And Greg Larson here has a 1968 36, and he's doing some panel upgrade work. He asks, is there any lubrication needed for the yoke scissor linkage and control cable attachments under the glare shield? It's not very clear in that area, and he was wondering if you should be doing something.
LPS2 is a good lubricant for anything in the airplane that moves except the flap limit switches. And we use grease and everything else that has grease fittings. But as a general purpose lubricant, LPS2 works great on any hinge, any cable in that moves. Pulleys don't really technically need to be lubricated. They're self-lubricating. But if you do lubricate them, use it very minimal to not get too much on it, and it spreads it around as they move. But LPS2 is a good all-purpose lubricant.
Excellent. And Randy O'Connor says he has a 1963 33B35, with an IO470K. You mentioned cam guard. No issues with starter adapters with slipping with cam guard? Thanks.
The biggest problem we're having with starter adapter slipping has been the 1550 oil. And it's a good oil, it's a great oil for the engine, but it just doesn't work well with our starter adapters because it causes slippage. The cam guard is not a lubricant at all. It's not an additive for the oil like AvBlend that's used in the Lycoming engines. It is a corrosion preventative material altogether. So I don't see any issues with cam guard. I've been running it in my airplane for many, many, many years, and I've never had a starter adapter issue.
Okay, excellent. We got a long question here from Kelly Miller, pardon me. They said, I have a 1981 A36 with an IO520 engine. The vacuum pressure is changing a lot. On the first flight of the day, the pressure is 4 to 5 PSI, but as the flight goes on, the pressure gradually decreases. On the second flight of the day, the pressure is low, even below the green arc. The attitude indicator sometimes takes a long time to erect when the pressure is low, but once airborne, even with low pressure, the attitude indicator seems to work normally.
It sounds like your air pressure regulator. That is a pressure system, not a vacuum system. And the air pressure regulator out on the firewall is adjustable, and they get sticky because they get dirt and debris in them from the air pumps, and the filters don't get changed regularly. Your inlet filter to the air pump and your pressure filter, your instrument, should be changed every single annual inspection, regardless of the amount of time on them. And especially if you change a pump, you should always change the filters with it, even if it's not an annual. But it sounds like your air pressure regulator is sticking. Tempest is now making replacement regulators for the old airborne regulators that were so expensive, and they're available through Aircraft Spruce.
Perfect. Okay, and our next question comes to us from Nick. He has a 1960 3533 Osborne 20-gallon tip tanks. He says, I have the tip tank valve set up with one ox tank position on the fuel tank selector and each tip having an on-off valve between the tank and selector. One tip tank valve has 90-degree freedom of rotation with hard stops. The other valve has 360-degree freedom of rotation with a spring dentant in the on and off position. Is one of those wrong? It's much easier to operate the 90-degree valve in flight.
I hate to say this, but I am not familiar enough with that system to give you a good answer there. I know that valve combination with those early Osborne systems was a lot different than what we use today. But I would post something on the member page, on the forum page, and see if somebody can help you with an answer for that that's more familiar with the system than I am.
Excellent. And Rick Brinkley asked for you to talk about that electronic ignition system you mentioned earlier and who makes it.
It's made by Electro-Air Systems. It is a direct replacement for one of the magnetos on the engine. You can only install it on one side. You must keep one of your original magnetos as a backup system. It is controlled by a computer that's mounted inside the cockpit. It fires the bottom spark plugs, and the original magneto fires the top spark plugs. And it is based on manifold pressure, depending on how much it retards or advances the spark in flight. Anything below 25 inches of manifold pressure will cause the spark to change, based on the amount of power you're using on the engine. And as I said, it makes the engine run much, much smoother, and hot starts are amazing because you've got double the amount of output than the standard magneto has for a spark.
Awesome. Okay. And our next question comes to us from Ryan. He says, with regard to my J35, normal flight without rudder pressure leaves half a ball to the right on the turn and slip indicator at all times. Does this mean rigging needs to be adjusted?
Yes, agreed. It could be as simple as an aileron adjustment. It could be a trim tab adjustment, or it could be a V-tail rotovator adjustment. You need to have somebody that knows about the V-tail look at it. First thing I'd like you to do is go outside of your airplane with the door open. Take a look at your flaps. Make sure that trailing edge of the flaps are even with the bottom of the fuselage on both sides. If they are, then I want you to center the control wheel in the cockpit using the right aileron from outside and see if the aileron, the trailing edge of the aileron, lines up with the trailing edge of the flaps. If it does on the right side, walk around and look at the left side. Make sure all that's correct before you do anything to the tail. Because when you start adjusting the tail, it takes a little bit more finesse and a little bit more knowledge of knowing what you're doing, how to tweak little things and make it fly straight. But it's not too hard to do if you know what you're doing.
Perfect. And we'll take another quick break here, give you a chance to catch your breath, Bob, because you're doing great. Thank you so much for answering all these questions for our members. Bob really is the best. He's our senior technical advisor. He's been with ABS since, you said 2005, right?
Yeah.
2005. He travels with us and he goes to our service clinics. He's an inspector at those. He goes to Oshkosh and Sun and Fun with us. He goes to BPPP Lives, and then him and Curtis Boulware, another ABS technical advisor, actually teach our maintenance academy courses that we do usually about twice a year, where we take mechanics and teach them all the ins and outs of the ABS service clinic and what they're looking for in those inspections. So thank you, Bob, for doing this for us today and for the members today. Again, we really appreciate it. And again, I'm Lauren Bayless, and I'm with the American Bonanza Society. I work at the office here in Wichita, and Bob is at his shop in Griffin, Georgia. And since we can't take tech calls like normal right now during this time, we thought we'll put on a Facebook Live and see if we can't answer some of your questions on Facebook. So if you have questions for Bob, feel free to post those in the comment section, and we'll try to address as many as possible. We're trying to kind of go in order here so we can keep track of what's going on. And then after this event is over, we're going to try to upload this whole stream to our YouTube page so that you guys can view this later and revisit any of the information or content you might have missed or didn't get to see earlier in the stream or later in the stream. So don't worry if you miss a portion of this broadcast. We'll have it on our YouTube page, and it should be on our Facebook page for after viewing, after this is over as well. So again, if you have a comment or a question for Bob, post that in the comment section, and we'll try to address those as soon as possible. So Bob, if you're ready, we'll go back into another round again.
Let's keep going, Lauren.
Okay, here we go. So Roger Roberts asks, in winter months, what temperature is your limit for starting up an IO520 without preheat? He says Phillips XC oil. Also, any other recommendations on preheat devices? He has an F33A.
I won't start my engine below 35 degrees without preheating it. I'm just in favor of making it easier on the engine. Also, too, if you do have a preheater, make sure I would turn the prop through a couple of times before you try to start the engine to loosen things up a little bit. There's several types of preheaters that are available. You can go as high as the Tannis system, which is probes in each cylinder. The Reef system is a band that goes around the base of the cylinders and on the cases. Then there's Easy Heat, EZ, Echo Zulu, that can be purchased, and it's just basically a pad that will glue on the side of each side of the oil pan. You can plug it in the night before or put it on a timer to come on the night before. And I do that here in the Atlanta area, and I can come out and start my engine the next morning when it's 30 degrees, and I'll be almost in the green on oil temperature. And it's a very simple system. It's probably $150.
Awesome.
Now, in the cold north, you've got to do more. It depends on where you are as the type of heating system you use.
I'm pretty sure Roger lives here in Wichita, so.
Okay. It wouldn't be too bad there.
Yeah. Excellent. So our next question comes from Steve Feldhouse. He says, I have a 1978 A36. A number of people suggest I take my plane to a different shop for annual every other year or perhaps every third year. My current shop, Mac Air in Shelbyville, Tennessee, has been very good to me, done a very good job, and I've had zero issues with their work. I'm just wanting your opinion on having a new set of ears and eyes and hands look on my plane over periodically.
I'm very, very, very much in favor of that. I have no problem if one of my customers wants to take one of the airplanes we've been maintaining and go to another shop and let them look at it. We're all human. You know, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We miss little things because we look at the same thing all the time. But somebody else with a different set of eyes and a different perspective on it that day sees something that we may not see. I'm all in favor. I get airplanes in here from other shops that people send in here or bring in here, and we look them over, and sometimes they're really good shape and sometimes they're really not. You know, it never knows. Curtis and I, we swap airplanes a lot between our two shops with customers. And we talk to each other all the time about it, about what we see and what we don't see. It's human nature. You miss things sometimes, but I'm all in favor of this.
Right. Excellent. And it's very funny. Just about 2 comments later, someone says, no matter where you live, you should take your Bonanza to Griffin, Georgia and have Bob Ripley perform your annual. So that's from Rick Binkley. All right. Our next question comes.
He's already on the schedule. That's why he's saying that.
He knows he can get in, but good luck to everyone else.
Yeah, I'm booking work for 2022 already.
Wow. That's good. It's good to stay busy.
Yes.
All right. Our next question comes from Tim. He says he has a 1992 A36, and I have the serial number if you need it. In cruise, I need a little left rudder to keep the ball centered. Flaps are not 100% level with the fuselage. Where to start the rigging? Thank you.
The first thing you've got to do is get the airplane all faired. In other words, the flaps need to be even with the bottom of the fuselage. The trailing edge of the ailerons needs to match the trailing edge of the flaps with the control wheel centered. If it matches the wingtips, that's fine. If it doesn't match the wingtips, that's fine too. After that's all straight, then go around and stand behind the tail cone and lift up on the elevator and look at the balance weight on the outboard into the elevator. See if they both line up with the top of the skin on the stabilizer at the same time. Put the trim tabs in 0. See if both trim tabs are even with the bottom of the elevator with the tab indicator in the cockpit at 0. If all of that is correct, then it may be as simple as retensioning the cables in the system to bring the airplane in. And if that won't do it, you may have to change the angle of incidence on one of the wings to bring it in. You got to straighten all the other stuff up first. When I rig an airplane that's new to us, I put everything back to neutral. I go fly the airplane with the customer. Then we decide what we're going to do. We bring it back, and usually we can do it in maybe 2 to 3 flights and get it straightened back out.
Perfect. Our next question comes to you from Christopher Curtin. He says, hi, Bob. You mentioned 1550 oil might cause slippage in the starter with the IO470. I have an IO520. Is it an issue with this engine? And if so, which oil should I use? Thank you. I'm currently using Phillips XC2050.
Okay. The Phillips XC2050 is not an issue at all. It's a straight petroleum-based oil. The Aeroshell 1550 is a semi-synthetic oil. It's great oil. It's very, very slick. It makes the engine run very good. But the way the starter adapter operates on the 470, the 520, and the 550, it causes issues with the starter adapter trying to slip because the oil is so slick, the way the adapters are designed. I'd say 90% of the times I have people call me with a starter adapter issue, the first thing I ask is what type of oil, and more than 90% of the time they're running 1550.
Perfect.
But the 2050 is a good oil for anywhere in the country.
Excellent.
And that's Phillips, yeah.
Yeah, Phillips. Our next question, Al says, hi, Bob. I have a 1974 F-33A. My gear warning horn quit working while in the air. My mechanic tested it while on jacks, and the horn worked. Any thoughts?
Okay. It depends on which gear warning horn you're talking about. If you're talking about the warning horn that comes on when you retard the throttle below 15 inches of manifold pressure, that comes off a switch located on the throttle cable up in the engine compartment. If we're talking about a warning horn associated with the squat switches or the gear safety switches on the landing gear, that's a different circuit altogether. maybe you can write back in and clarify a little bit when the horn is coming on the ground and what he's doing at getting it on the ground and what's happening in flight. Or call me, you know, or send your phone number into the tech tips, and I'll be glad to call you. We can discuss it on the phone.
Okay, perfect, Al. If you heard that, if you're still live with us, Bob says that you can either let us know the information here in the comment section, or you can reach back out to Bob after this is over, and he'd be happy to help talk through that with you. Our next question comes from Kelly Miller, and they say, which direction do you start the prop prior to a cold weather start?
I'm not really sure what you're asking here. If your prop is installed, if it's a 3-blade prop and it's installed correctly, it should have 2 blades pointing down in a V position and 1 blade pointing up. If it's a 2-blade prop, it really doesn't matter where you start it at, cold or hot. It's a good idea if it's cold to rotate the prop through a couple of blades. Just make sure that you have complied with the AD 761207 on your ignition switch recently to make sure you don't have a hot magneto, because it's very dangerous.
Very good. Very good. Randy O'Connor also asks, he is a 1963 Deb with an IO470K. Half of my attention is flying the airplane, and the other half of my attention is trying to keep my CHTS, specifically number 4, as cool as possible. And he says 375 or under. Are DeShannon's baffles worth it, or another producer? CHTCS loves to run warm on this.
Okay. With the IO470K engine, we don't limit it to 400 like we do with the 470s, 520s, and 550 because it's designed different. It has a different setting. DeShannon does not make a baffle kit for that engine. We designed one in our shop for DeShannon several years ago, but there wasn't enough market to produce them and sell them. So keep your baffles in good shape. Keep your all the rubber parts in good shape. Make sure they're all folded forward so the air goes in the right direction. If there's any hole in the metal pieces of baffle between the cylinders or between the aft side of the engine and the engine airplane firewall, plug them up with some sort of a sealant. Make the air go where you want it to go. But 375 on a K engine is not any problem at all. 400 on a K engine is not a problem because it does run hotter than the standard 470, 520, and 550.
Perfect. Our next question comes to us from Michael, and he says, Mike Partis here. I have a 67 B35 with factory O2. When filling the tank, is there worry about overcharging when the charging tank can go up to 2,400 pounds?
You should have a gauge in the airplane that indicates how much is in the tank in the airplane, and you want to fill it up to the top of the green mark. I can't remember exactly what it is on that airplane. Depends on the system. The different systems installed have different limits on them. But there should be a limit on the bottle that's in the airplane on the gauge, or a gauge in the airplane to indicate what to charge it to.
Okay, perfect. And we'll take another quick break here real quick to welcome everyone who is just joining us to this Facebook live stream. We've got Bob Ripley here, Senior Technical Advisor to the ABS, and he is at his shop in Griffin, Georgia. And I am Lauren Bayless, Director of Member Services at the American Bonanza Society here in Wichita, Kansas. And today we're answering your tech questions. Since we're all working from home right now, we're not able to transfer calls to our technical advisors like normal. And so we thought this was a good opportunity to try to connect you guys with Bob on as close of a face-to-face level as we can here. So as you guys are joining us, if you have any questions, any technical questions for Bob, maintenance questions, post those in the comment section. Include the model and serial number if you have that handy, and we will get these answered as many as we can in the time we have. We've got probably about another 20 minutes here or so that we'll keep at this and ask your questions. We'll get to them as we can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you all are doing well and staying safe at home right now, and hopefully giving Bob a few breaks in here because this is a good long hour of just questions. So are you doing okay, Bob?
Doing fine, Lauren. Let's keep going. Okay,
here we go. We're going to go back into the questions again. And our next question comes from Danny Drew. He says, 1975 F-33A, a Concorde RG 35 AXC, 13 months old and failed, just replaced. What is your opinion of using the battery minder for the Concorde? Some says it's no good to leave it on all the time, and others says it is just a way to sell more batteries. I fly about 100+ hours a year, and the last battery lasted about 5 years.
If you use a battery minder, make sure you have a battery minder that is for aircraft, not just a little battery charger or a trickle charger that's made for automobiles or lawnmower engines or tractors or something like that. If you have an actual battery minder made by Battery Minder that's for an aircraft battery, it will not overcharge the battery. It will not damage the battery. It's a good thing for the battery because it will keep the battery charged at the level it should be. If it sees that it needs a little bit of charge because you're not flying all the time, then it'll charge it a little bit and it'll go back to idle, basically in idle mode, and just wait till it needs to be charged again. That's a good battery you've got in your airplane. Make sure that you do have the STC when you put it in, because it does require an STC to install the Concorde battery in a 12-volt airplane, the B-35 or the B-tails or the straight-tail 12-volt airplanes. That can be obtained from Wilco in Wichita. So if you're going to buy the battery, buy it from Wilco, and they give you the STC to go along with it. But use the battery minder. It's not a problem. Make sure that you buy the new battery interface kit. You're not allowed to hook up directly to the battery anymore. That's been the new rule from the FAA a couple of years now, because we had a couple of fires of people hooking up themselves and the wire shorted out and caused the airplanes to burn up.
No.
There is a battery interface kit available from Spruce. I think it's about $69, but it has to be hooked directly to the relay, and it plugs into a hard coupling, and you mount into the engine compartment and plug your battery minder into it. That needs to be added on if you're going to use a battery minder.
Okay, perfect. And I got a little note here that I might have read a question incorrectly earlier. Kelly asks, which direction do you turn the prop prior to a cold weather start?
Well, I would turn it in. I don't really understand what you're asking, but I guess you want to move the prop. Turn it in the direction of normal rotation.
Okay.
If you're going to turn it before you start the engine.
Kelly, I hope that helps answer your question. If you have further information you want to share, go ahead and post that down below and we'll try to get to that. So moving on to our next question, Greg Holland says, hi, Bob. I'd like your comments on a plane that needs to sit for a while. For example, should I turn over the prop every now and then since I can't fly? I have a 1966 C-33A with an IO 520.
There is specific instructions in the maintenance manual, and Continental came out with a service letter yesterday. I saw it either yesterday or the day before about prolonged downtime with the COVID-19 problem. So that would apply to your airplane also. But there is flyable storage, there is short-term storage, and there's long-term storage in the maintenance manual for your specific airplane. Have your mechanic take a look at them, and you have to determine how much you're going to fly and how far you want to go into the storage level. But there is specific instructions in the manual.
Perfect. And Russell says he's looking at doing an exterior paint in the near future. He has some minor hail damage, and he wants to know your thoughts on the best filler. He has less than 132-inch dents or fillers to avoid.
I'm not a filler fan. If it's flight controls or it's something that can be replaced, I would replace it. If it's your ailerons, what kind of airplane was it again, Lauren?
He didn't say.
Okay. If it's an aileron, if it's an airplane with ailerons without a trim tab on it, such as an F-33 or a B-tail or something like that, you can flip the ailerons over and put them on the opposite side. Take the left one, put it on the right, put the left one on the right one on the left, and then you put the hail damage down so it's not as noticeable. But fill in all the little dents around the airplane, I don't think you're going to be happy with it because it's hard to get them feathered in right. I've seen some airplanes that it was done and it does not look well unless they really take a lot of pains with it. And it would probably be cheaper if you can replace the skin that's damaged. If you can replace it, you'd be ahead of the game.
Perfect. And our next question comes to us from Glenn Young. He has a 1968 B-55. He says, please reply about play in the push-pull elevator rod end, please.
Okay. We talked about this earlier. If you go around to the back of the airplane and you have free play in your elevator, in other words, if you can take your fingertips and just barely move the elevator, don't make the flight controls move, don't make the control in the cockpit move. If you've got free play in the elevators that's not moving the control wheel, that needs to be addressed by replacement of the rod ends. And then you can re-rig the elevators to make them fared correctly according to the specs also when you do that.
Perfect. Our next question is from Ron Thomas. He says, I have a D35 with an E225-8. Will changing out the side cowlings to ones with vents help keep the CHT lower?
I'm not sure that's approved. I think it is to do it on the D35. Yes, it will help move some better airflow through the engine compartment, and it will help keep the CHT down. I would put that one out on the forum page for sure and get some comments. Maybe Lou would jump in on that or something like that, because he's the expert on the older airplanes.
Perfect. Okay. So Ron, if you heard that, if you would like to go and post that in the tech tip section of the member forum, then we can have our technical advisors kind of look at that and respond to you there. Our next question comes from Sean Clay, and he says, what would the temperature limit be on the IO 470K? I see temperatures of 406 on initial climb out.
I'm going to get my book.
Sure.
Okay. Cylinder head temperature limits. The limit for the IO 470K is 460. Recommended max at cruise 375. So on takeoff, you can go up to 400, 420. Max is 460, and they recommend 375 at cruise. If you can't maintain 375 in cruise, you have airflow issues for sure. And I would try to direct most of your issues with CHT. Fuel flow is not going to help that. If you have cow flaps, I'm not sure exactly what kind of airplane it is. I don't remember. But if you have cow flaps, make sure they're open all the way. If they're not, if you're flying with them closed, try and open them, see if it changes it. But it sounds like probably a baffle issue if you can't stay below the 375.
Perfect. Okay. Our next question comes from Oliver Coolidge. He has a 1972 G33 470N. First power reduction to 25 inches and 2,500. Fuel flow decreases to about 16 gallons an hour. And he says fuel flow does not pressure, and EGT rises to within 100 degrees of peak. CHTs are okay. Return to normal, meaning fuel flow increases as throttle is advancing to maintain 25 inches as the airplane climbs. I've been advised to consider a fuel system overhaul. Your thoughts? What is involved besides a fuel pump overhaul?
Okay, first of all, you do not need to reduce the throttle for climb. That used to be the way we were taught many, many, many years ago. Leave the throttle wide open for climb. You're never going to reduce the throttle. If you're going to climb to 8,000 feet, you're never going to touch the throttle till you start down. And even then, I don't do it till I build back up to 22 inches of manifold pressure. Reduce your RPM to 2,500 if you want to. That's not even necessary, or 2,400, whatever you want to climb at for the noise level. Because reduction of the throttle creates a dramatic fuel flow decrease. RPM creates a minor fuel flow decrease. Make sure you are getting on that end engine. You should be at 17.3 PSI on the old analog gauge in the cockpit. And about, you're probably talking 24.2, 24.3 gallons per hour on takeoff with full throttle and 2650 RPM. So do not reduce the throttle for climb. Leave it alone. It's fine. Wide open.
Perfect. And as we kind of head here into our last 10 minutes of the hour, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's continuing to join us. We've got lots and lots of viewers who are logging in right now and posting their questions. Again, this is ABS Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley here with us from his shop in Griffin, Georgia, and I'm Lauren Bayless from the ABS headquarters in Wichita, Kansas. So we're so glad you all have joined us today and have been asking your questions to Bob. We've got about 10 minutes here, and then we're going to give Bob a break from this great hour of just information sharing. So thank you, Bob, so much for answering all these questions so far. You've done a great job, and this is why we love you. I know you can't see them right now, but we're just getting floods of comments from people who are saying thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to say thank you, Bob, for doing this for us as we kind of top out the end of the hour here. So we've got a handful of more questions that we still want to try to get to. So if you're good with that, Bob, I'm going to jump back in and we'll try to get these answered.
Let's get as many as we can in for the hour.
Perfect. Okay, our next question comes from David Green. He has a G36 Bonanza. He says, getting exhaust in cabin at 70 ppm on takeoff. As soon as the wheels are up, it goes down to 0 ppm. I checked the boots and the wheel wells and they are fine. Where else should I look?
I would have your shop pressure check your muffler with a shop vac by blowing air in the tailpipe and then check it with bubble fluid. You may have a crack in one of the mufflers or in the exhaust system somewhere and you're getting exhaust in that way. It's real common to get some right after takeoff and it's coming up through the main wheel well. If the boots and the wheel wells are okay on the main wheel, on the main gear also. And when you get the gear up, if it stops, I would look at the boots in the main wheel well, but check the exhaust system too to make sure you don't have a minor little crack somewhere and with bubble fluid and air pressure.
Perfect. And I've seen kind of a follow-up question. Remember the question about Kelly turning the prop? Chris Curtin says, hi, Bob. I think the question is about turning the prop when cold is about which direction, path of flight or reversed. Cessna's 182T's cold weather start produce is to turn the prop backwards after a few turns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I've never seen anything in the manual that says one way or the other. I would normally turn in the direction of rotation because that's where the oil is there and you're trying to get it to move some of that oil around. I'm not real sure about that one, Lauren. I've never seen anything hard and fast in the Bonanza book or about it or anything in the maintenance manuals about turning in a certain direction.
Okay. Well, you know, Kelly, this might be a good one to post in the tech tip section of the member forum. We'll see if any other technical advisors might have any ideas about it, want to respond to it. So feel free to go ahead and post that in the tech tips on the member forum if you like. And other than that, we'll just keep on moving on. Bob, any update on the availability of new magnesium skins? That's from Mark.
Not as of yet. We have heard some things about they were going to produce 22 left and 22 right for the large cord stabilizer or rotavators, which are the S model, Sierra model, 1964 and later. But that's been quite a few months ago that we heard this. That's the best I can give you as far as an update. We still have our prize program out there trying to get somebody to certify. There's been talk, we've even heard talk or seen talk about going back to the old fabric type rotavators that we have to, like we have on the early model airplanes to start with. I've talked with 2 shops in Canada recently that don't have the same EPA rules we do with dipping and the material issues with the coatings and everything that they have to use, and they're involved in it. They're trying to do some stuff too. We put everybody in touch with the people at Textron that handle this, and they're giving them the access to what they need to try to come up with a solution.
Perfect. And this question is from Troy. He says, I have a 1978 836 with a 520 engine. My number 2 and number 4 cylinder would hit around 415 or higher CHT on takeoff, and I noticed my max GPH on takeoff was only around 22 GPH. I had an aftermarket GAMI baffle kit added and the GPH adjusted. Now on takeoff, it redlines on GPH and almost redlines on the manifold pressure. My CHT now runs around 375 on takeoff, much cooler. The question, will the fact its redliness, pardon me, the question is, will the fact that it's redliness on takeoff hurt the engine? Red lines. Whoa. The question is, will the fact that it red lines on takeoff hurt the engine?
Well, manifold pressure, if this is a normally aspirated engine, not a turbo normalized or turbocharged engine, you're only going to get what you're going to get for manifold pressure. You can never over boost it without a turbocharger. So wide open throttle is not going to hurt anything for manifold pressure. As far as fuel flow, if 24.9 is what the book says to set a 520 engine at, for takeoff at sea level with full throttle and full RPM of 2,700. If you're going to 25.5, maybe even 25.6, 25.7, you're not going to hurt anything. The extra fuel is going to go back to the tank anyway through the return system. But leave the throttle in for climb, reduce the RPM to bring the noise level down a little bit, and it'll keep your engine cooler.
Perfect. And I'm looking for a question from Gilbert. Bari, if you hear this, if you can re-ask the question you're saying that we missed from Gilbert. Oh, you know what? I see it right here. Question from Gilbert S. that says, Beach recommends, for example, that the flap and gear motors be overhauled every 2,000 hours. I am reluctant to have things that are working well played with. What are your thoughts? What system seems to give the most problems if these time limit suggestions are not followed? Thank you.
Okay, first of all, let's start with the flap system. The flap system on the Bonanza and the Baron aircraft is a very, very substantial system, and it works very, very well. We don't have much problem with it. Every once in a while, you'll change a motor. In the 35 or 40 years that I've been doing this, I probably changed 3 flap motors. We have more issues with the flap system with the switches, and the cables need to be lubed every so often, but the motors don't have a lot of problems. The landing gear motor, yes, we do suggest every 2,000 flight hours, have the motor overhauled. You don't need to replace it with an overhaul motor or have your motor overhauled. Because of the fact the brushes do get worn, there is paperwork in the maintenance manual to replace the brushes in the field. That is not recommended because of the fact that you have no way to seat the brushes properly, and the landing gear motor brush contact to the commutator is a direct indicator or direct control over the dynamic brake that stops your gear from hitting mechanical stops. So if you ever find your gearbox hitting mechanical stops when you do your test at annual inspection, the motor is more than likely the issue unless you've got a bad ground or another issue somewhere else. But yes on the motors, no on the flaps. On the gear motors and no on the flap motors.
Perfect. So that was for Gilbert and for Bari, because he said he was kind of interested in the same thing. So thanks for answering that, Bob. And then we have one last question, actually. This is about perfect. Right now it's from Joe, and he says, where are the most important spots on the airframe to look for corrosion on a 55 Baron for a pre-buy?
Okay. The biggest issue you're going to find with corrosion is going to be on the elevators because I don't know what year the airplane is. It's probably an older one if it's a 55. Do you have a serial number?
No serial number. So Joe, if you hear this and you can give us your serial number or the year of your 55 Baron, we'll respond better. I'll let you know if he responds.
The elevators were still magnesium back when the 55s were being built. So look at the elevators very carefully. We have a lot of problem with filiform corrosion, which looks like little tiny worms crawling underneath the paint. It looks like little worms crawling in the paint. If you see that, that's called filiform corrosion. It needs to be addressed immediately. The second biggest issue is, depending on how they've been maintained, remove the covers that cover the wing bolts on the top of the wings with the little clips. If you check the wing bolts carefully, if they've been maintained correctly and had corrosion proofing put on them every annual, it won't be an issue. But if you look in there and there's a lot of corrosion, they're all rusty, that's a big issue to be careful of, because then the wing bolts are going to need to be replaced.
He says it's a 68 or a 69 D55.
Okay, it will come with magnesium elevators unless they've been reskinned in aluminum. So that is the biggest area you want to look at, is the elevators, because you can reskin them in aluminum, but it's quite expensive.
Okay, and we've had one more question sneak in. So Steve, we're going to answer your question last. He's got a question. He says, please explain proper alignment, flaps, aileron, and fuselage bottom. He's got a 1987 A36.
Okay. Just a walk around that an owner can do is have the flaps in the up position, go look at sight down the trailing edge of the flap from the outboard into the flap. The inboard trailing edge of the flap should be even with the bottom of the fuselage as a good alignment point, both sides, left and right. The left flap is the master flap because the switches are located on the left flap. The right flap is the slave flap, so it's following the left flap where it shuts off at by the switches. If the flaps are even with the bottom of the fuselage, then take your aileron on the right aileron and center the control wheel using the aileron from outside. Just look in the door with the door open and level the control wheel. And look at the aileron. It should be lined up with the trailing edge of the flap. So if you go to the outboard end of the aileron and sight down the trailing edge of the aileron, it should be one continuous line, aileron to trailing edge of the flap, all the way to the bottom of the fuselage on both sides. If it lines up with the wingtip, that's okay. If it doesn't line up with the wingtip, that's okay too. We were more important with the larger area with the flap lining up with the fuselage and the aileron lining up with the trailing edge of the flap.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I think we did a really great job. Bob, you answered a ton of questions. No, that literally is the last question for today.
That couldn't work out any better.
Right. You know, this seems to have been a really great success. We've had lots and lots of people log on, and I just really quickly want to give a shout out to Dara at the ABS office. She's been helping behind the scenes manage and monitor some of the comments and respond to you guys as well. So thank you so much, Dara, for your help with this, and for Whit and for Tom for trusting us to try this and do something new. And of course, the biggest thank you to Bob Ripley. As people have said in the comments, Bob is the Bonanza god, and you know just about everything you can know about Beechcraft, and we appreciate so much the time that you have taken with us today to answer these questions. I would check your email because there's a possibility we might do another one of these in the near future again. Bob, how do you feel? Did you enjoy this?
I really enjoyed doing this. I like talking to all the members, and I hope they realize that I don't mind you asking questions on the forum page. I don't mind ever. I will get back to you as soon as I can if you send me a phone number. Some days I get more than I can handle in a day because I'm trying to run a shop too.
Right.
But I don't mind talking to the members. I really, really enjoy it. I wouldn't do this if I didn't, because some days it gets a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
But especially now where they can't call in. But this was fun today. I enjoyed doing it. We need to do it again, maybe another month or something, and see what happens. And we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's going to watch this after the fact, if you have questions for our technical advisors, you can go to our website, bonanza.org, and log in as an ABS member and go to the member forum under the community tab. This member forum has been very active ever since this whole kind of shelter in place has started. So if you're not a member of the American Bonanza Society, let me be the first to tell you that this right here is one of the many benefits you get as an ABS member. So we'd love to have you join. You can go to our website, bonanza.org, and join as a member if you're not already. And then you can continue to ask our technical advisors questions like this throughout the week. You don't have to wait for a live Facebook event with Bob to do this. So thank you to everyone who is still viewing this right now, who has joined us and asked questions throughout this last hour. Thank you so much to Bob Ripley, ABS Senior Technical Advisor. We appreciate all that you do for us, and we hope you guys stay safe and take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Had fun today. Call back again the next time. We'll keep
trying.
trying.
Bye-bye, everyone.